If you're a woman over 40 who's been doing all the right things but can't seem to lose stubborn fat around your midsection, you're not alone and you're not crazy. The strategies that worked in your 30s suddenly seem useless, and no matter how much you cut calories or increase cardio, the scale refuses to budge. What's worse, your doctor might have told you this is just what happens after 40 without offering any real solutions. Today, I invited on a women's health expert to reveal why perimenopause creates the perfect hormonal storm for fat gain, why eat less, move more actually backfires during this life stage, and the specific nutrition and lifestyle adjustments that can help you reclaim your metabolism without sacrificing your sanity. Welcome to Wits and Weights, the show that helps you build a strong, healthy physique using evidence, engineering, and efficiency. I'm your host, Philip Pape, and today I'm bringing you a collaboration with Brooke Davis, founder of Elysian Women's Wellness and host of the Fitness Simplified podcast. Make sure to follow her podcast because we're dropping 2 episodes simultaneously for different parts of the conversation. Today on this podcast, we're talking about a very hot topic, fat loss during perimenopause. What is really going on with your hormones, your metabolism, body composition during this transition? How to shift what you do, your nutrition, your lifestyle, without quick fixes, without detoxes, cutting carbs, any of the other nonsense you might hear all over the internet today. And Brooke has spent over a decade helping hundreds of women navigate midlife fitness. She's a certified nutrition coach, personal trainer, women's health specialist. She's done it all. She's developed protocols that address the specific hormonal shifts of peri and postmenopause to help women transform their bodies when other methods have stopped working. So today, you are going to learn why the usual fat loss advice won't cut it for women over 40, the true non-negotiables during this phase, and the best nutrition and lifestyle behaviors to support your hormones. Last thing, before we get into it, if you want to hear the other side of this conversation, make sure to follow the Fitness Simplified podcast. Brooke is interviewing me on the muscle and metabolism side of this during fat loss for perimenopause. There's a lot of overlap anyway, isn't there? And that dropped the same day as this episode. So Fitness Simplified podcast, or click the link in the show notes. Brooke, enough of me talking. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to chat today.
So let's get right into the topic, which is why the heck is it so hard for women as they get older, whether it's because of hormones or something else, you tell us, to lose fat, or perhaps you gain body fat? What is going on?
There are so many factors, and as you mentioned, hormones, that is one of the biggest things that is changing, right? Literally, women's internal chemistry, their physiology is shifting majorly. Hormones that, have kept us steady throughout our entire life are at a major decline, along with fluctuations throughout this time. And, a lot of women are like, oh, I just, need to have more willpower. My metabolism is failing, things like that. But, the reality of it is that a lot of times it's nothing that they're doing wrong per se. It's just that the things that they need to do now versus when they were 20 do have to be different because they themselves are different. They're, like I said, their whole physiology is actually shifting in a pretty big way. And so, those strategies that used to work don't really work anymore. Long story short.
No, great. Please, it's good to get into these. And I'm always like champing at the bit with like follow-up questions because you said some really neat things there. One thing you mentioned, and I want to pull the thread, is, things have changed. Your physiology has changed. The thing did in your 20s isn't working. But let me ask you this honestly, how many people are doing even the right things in their 20s? Because I want to set the stage. And how are they getting away with not doing the right things? Let's be honest.
Yeah. So like you mentioned, most people in their 20s when you put it like that, they're not doing the optimal things, right? They might do things that produce results in terms of fat loss, but they're not necessarily doing the things that are going to bring them optimal health. And, this is why, like you said, there's a lot of overlap, because the reality of it is that the things that bring you optimal health in your 20s will bring you fat loss and optimal health in your 40s. But most people in their 20s don't care about optimal health. They don't care about the rate at which they get the fat loss results that they're looking for. And so what tends to happen is they're taking really extreme, really ultimately stressful measures, stressful on their bodies to reach the goals that they want. They're exercising way too much. They're usually it's high intensity, which there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. But when that's all you're doing, and a lot of it, they're undernourishing or undereating in general. And, they're really not, like I said, focused on nutrients, not focused on nourishing their body. Everything they do is really extreme. So that is, the biggest kind of shift that needs to occur is that your body doesn't now in your 40s, even honestly, 30s, like I'm 34, I'm going to be 35 next year. So, your body doesn't have the resilience for it anymore. And one of the things, I'm a functional diagnostic nutritionist, and one of our kind of coined terms is vital reserve. And when you're 20, right, you have that vital reserve. Well, some people do, some people don't, right? But when you're 40 and you've been doing those things for, 20 years, maybe stressing your body out, undernourishing, right? Burning the candle at both ends, not getting enough sleep, your body doesn't have the vital reserve to continue to function well or well enough that you don't notice it in your 40s.
Yeah, there are some nuances there that I think are lost on some people, because I wanted to ask it that way because I can think of my 20s, like I got away with a lot of things. Now, I wasn't into fitness. I was definitely doing lots of weird diets, going back to Slim Fast and Atkins and all that stuff. That's how old I am. I'm in my 40s, so about 10-year difference. But it's like the thought that in your 20s, the things you can do, your body just can mitigate them significantly. Like you suggested, that's more resilient, the vital reserve. It's like you can get away with it and you learn these bad habits. Like you just end up learning or thinking that this works and that's the best way to do it. Over exercising, like you said, undernourishing, which is a great substitute word for undereating, because then it implies it's not just about food in general or energy in general. It's nutrients, it's vitality, it's support of your body. And then what about, let's get into the physiological changes. It sounds like there's a double whammy going on of accumulation. You mentioned accumulated stress, for example, of just bad habits. So that starts in your 20s. And then the physiology changes on top of that. So maybe we focus on that piece of it.
Yeah. So, hormonally speaking, right, we'll start in physiologically in perimenopause. The first thing to go is estrogen and progesterone, which are, our two main sex reproductive hormones. And so with that, progesterone is usually at a pretty steady decline. And that is what tends to kind of cause issues initially. And then what happens is the estrogen is doing this, like along the way. So it's drastically increasing and tanking, increasing, tanking, which is putting you into, estrogen dominance, not zero estrogen dominance. And that is what causes a ton of the symptoms that women probably have the most complaints about, which is like weight loss resistance, the accumulation of fat around the belly, the hot flashes, night sweats, things like that those are the most common complaints. And that is caused by those massive fluctuations in estrogen. So it's not just about that these hormones are declining, it's that they're erratic. And that in and of itself is really stressful on the body, as one can imagine. And then on top of that, those fluctuations, quite literally, you have estrogen receptors throughout your entire body, from your brain, your joints, your muscles. And so every system in the body is then impacted by that. And then going into cortisol, your cortisol is, your, again, sensitivity to these things is really elevated. And so cortisol then is impacted. So your adrenal glands, what a lot of people don't know, are like your secondary sex hormone producers. So they're basically all you have left after your ovaries are done, which I think if people knew that, they would pay more attention to stress management, like going into this, because that is a major, major factor. And so those are, some of the main like impacted hormone systems and that go on during perimenopause.
Yeah, that's really well described, because sometimes it gets oversimplified with like, well, progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, they all drop. Like, okay, it's more than that. What you talked about, the estrogen erraticness, yeah. The scarcity versus the dominance, and it's relative to the other hormones too, is what you implied. Plus the fact that your body's sensitive to estrogen. It's funny because I believe men are as well, but right, we don't have that variance, so we can't get what's going on with the ladies in this time of their life. And then, of course, the downstream of cortisol, which cortisol is a boogeyman for lots of things. But what you're suggesting, it's like downstream, it's an indicator of what is going on, your HPA axis, your adrenal glands. So it's all tied together. And I like that you brought up symptoms as well, because I think that's a good source of biofeedback and listening to your body of like, okay, you've got the hot flashes, you're building excess belly fat, you're not able to lose weight. Something's telling you, and hope is not all lost, right? Like it's not the end of the road. So before we get into the like what to do in more details, what about testosterone and DHEA? Where do they come into the picture?
Yeah. So testosterone is also declining. Unfortunately, that's a big one. DHEA, right? That's kind of like your backup, right? It's made in the adrenals, and so that the supporting your adrenal health and making sure that stress management is a really big part of really like as much of life as you can make it from as early as you can make it is really powerful. Like funny backstory. So my grandma, she's 91 this year, and she's been taking this supplement for like a really long time. It's called Unforgettables. So it's like a brain health supplement. But I looked at it, I was looking at the ingredients, and there's phosphatidylserine in it. And that is a like cortisol regulator, decreases cortisol in the body. And I'm like, and she was talking about how like menopause like really wasn't a thing for her, like it wasn't an issue. She's always just been like cruising along. And she still has horses. She lives almost on her own. Like she's very independent. And I was like, I wonder if that's like your secret weapon right here. This, cortisol management, grandma, like that's, how powerful that is. And not that obviously it's not a causation or, correlation isn't causation.
We're going to end the podcast right there and say, call to action, go get here's your affiliate link, by the way.
Yeah. No, I don't sell that product, but no, it was just really cool because I'm like, interesting. So
wait, is it acting like a nootropic or an adaptogen, kind of like ashwagandha?
No, it's just it just helps manage cortisol, and like I said, it just makes it less impactful on the body, right? And so it actually lowers your cortisol in general, but so it's not actually indicated for everybody. Like if you already have whatever adrenal quote unquote adrenal fatigue, like it may not be for everybody. So don't go run out and get your phosphatidylserine. Yeah. But it was just, like I said, it just was funny that, that's like a big thing. And my 91-year-old grandma is like crushing it over here. So, but yeah, so DHEA, like I said, and the adrenal glands are really, really powerful, and they are your backup engine basically to hormone production and, less symptoms through perimenopause. There have been studies to where, women whose nervous system was more regulated, right? They were more in that parasympathetic state. They experienced less to no hot flashes throughout, despite estrogen levels equaling and being the same as other women, right? At the time of testing, because it's all erratic. But despite similar estrogen levels at the time of testing, women who, said that they were in more of a parasympathetic state, they had a better HRV, that kind of thing. They actually had less like vasomotor symptoms than the other group. So it's really, really powerful.
Yeah, it always, all roads seem to lead to stress, no matter who I talk to, having been in this business myself. And there's a lot of angles to it, right? There's a lot of ways to attack the ultimate getting into that a nervous system state you want to be in. Do you watch TV? Like, have you seen the new White Lotus? Do you watch that show at all? Okay. So in the latest season, they go to this meditation center, and there's like a monk, basically. I don't know if it's Tibetan, but this is in Thailand, I think. And it made me think, like, if we were just out of civilization in general and back to like hunter-gatherers, just living the life, the stress would be so much lower, right? Like that's the root of all our problems. Anyway.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
I think about that stuff. Like, let's just get rid of it all, right? But you mentioned, so cortisol, and then there's insulin, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a connection there. I don't know if you had mentioned it yet, but maybe we get into that. Then I want to ask about HRT, and then finally, let's get into lifestyle. So insulin. Yeah.
Yeah. So insulin regulation it's really disrupted. You become more insulin resistant during perimenopause simply because of the hormonal shifts, estrogen, progesterone, cortisol, that impacts your blood sugar. So, throughout that is definitely one like really simple shift that women can make. I don't know if we're going to get into that yet, but that is, insulin resistance leads to metabolic disease. That is part of, the decline of metabolism in the system overall. And so that is absolutely a consideration during perimenopause that can be addressed really easily with nutrition and lifestyle.
Yeah. So you're such a tease. Like, what is the super secret sauce to doing that? And actually, before we do that, is it HRT?
No.
Okay.
No. I mean, it can potentially help for sure. But yeah, as far as, nutrition, I don't want to take your glory because that's on your podcast, but muscle is
there's overlap. There's lots of overlap. It's all good.
Yeah.
Jump into it. You can't just separate them. You can't separate them.
First and foremost is muscle. The more muscle you have, the less impact all of that is going to have on the body. More, glycogen gets shuttled into the muscles, the less insulin sensitivity. So as far as nutrition goes, managing blood sugar, making sure that you have balanced meals, first of all, making sure that, each meal starts with a fiber, fat, and then ideally going to protein and then your carbohydrates. So that slows down the digestion and reduces the impact on blood sugar.
Okay, hold on. Let's break it down for people. Let's do blood sugar because there's a lot of misinformation about blood sugar.
Yeah,
a lot of CGM stuff out there as well, like the glucose monitors. For better or worse, it's a tool. Yeah. And I just had actually Christina McClurkin was just on recently. You know her from our group as well.
Yeah.
Right, and blood sugar is like one of her pillars. There we go. Yeah. So we all understand the value of fiber and stuff, but you just said start with a fiber. I think you said fiber and then fat. And then protein and then vegetable or carbs. Mm-hmm. Is that like the sequence of building your plate you're thinking, or the sequence of how you eat with your plate? What are you referring to?
How you eat. I mean, you could do it to build your plate as well. Absolutely. Yeah. But yeah, the order in which you actually eat your food.
Good. Okay. Sequencing. Yep. Cool.
Yes.
All right. Continue. I just wanted to touch on the blood sugar piece.
Blood sugar. Okay. So yes, the order in which, and then of course, making sure that overall, you're not eating a ton of processed sugar, processed carbohydrates. That is like first and foremost. That I tend to skip that because I'm like, that's a given, right? But it's not. So, reducing sugar, reducing added sugars. Even if you have, fruits are generally speaking okay. If you have, type 2, whatever, type 1 diabetes or whatever already, then that is something you want to manage and make sure that even, with your fruit, maybe everyone is different. And this is the crazy thing. Like there have been studies to where, one person might react to a sweet potato, their blood sugar might go through the roof, and another person might be totally fine, like that they don't have that much of an impact. So that is one reason where one reason why CGMs can actually be really powerful. Continuous glucose monitors for those who are familiar with that, but because, and it's not only food that spikes your blood sugar, stress, right? Periods of stress. If cortisol is being pumped in your system, then, that can impact your blood sugar. And so managing that first and foremost, but that is where, like I said, if you have access to a CGM, I really think, and especially through perimenopause, it's just data. It's not to confuse the fact that your blood sugar should stay in a straight line all day long. No, but there may be things impacting your blood sugar that you don't realize that do have more, of an effect on you than even other people. So that can absolutely be a powerful tool just for information and making, small shifts that help support your body. But
and why is blood sugar important?
I mean, it's stress on the body is the reality of it. And the more, your body has to work to produce insulin to regulate it, it's just having to work overtime.
Okay, that's a good one. I'm glad you said that because a lot of people have a different angle they come to when they talk about blood sugar. For some people, it is the insulin, where I think that's overplayed if you're lifting, if you're living the right lifestyle. Right. And others say it's the energy crashes, but I think that's because of the inconsistency in your cortisol, which is your stress. And what you're implying is that overall, you're saying that chronic stress can be pushed up if you have erratic blood sugar. Is that right?
Yeah.
Important to know, like all the different things that cause it. It's the same thing with like inconsistent sleep and wake times and inconsistent eating patterns and all that. So your body wants to be safe and secure, and that's one way to do it. Okay.
Yeah, cool. 100%. And like you mentioned, like, yes, energy levels, cravings for sure, for fast energy if your blood sugar is spiking and then tanking. So, those are all, again, it's a stressor on the body overall, but impacts how you feel and how you perform. And then going on walks, as far as managing, blood sugar after meals, a 10-minute walk. There's also a really recent study that came out. It's all over, but it was 10 squats every 45 minutes actually managed blood sugar better than a 30-minute walk after meals. But just that consistent input of glucose into the muscles and utilization of it throughout the day, like I said, it just helped manage blood sugar. And I'm sure they're as they went, I don't know how long the study actually was, but I'm sure they built muscle and it improved everything. So
hold on, so that's cool. I hadn't heard about that one. Did they at all compare it to like one long training session in the day?
No, it was compared to walks.
Okay.
Yeah,
because I was wondering if because again, I always make the anecdotal argument. I think it's supported by evidence, but that like a nice solid training session, hard training session in the morning is great for your stress for the whole day. And it might have a similar effect of like the micro doses of movement. Just wondering.
Yeah. No, there's actually, so the studies, this wasn't specifically on blood sugar, but the studies on exercise snacks, there are some studies, especially based on like strength that I've read, that they actually were able to improve strength performance better by breaking up sessions because of the recovery piece of it, right? And then exercise snacks, as far as the benefits of it are equal to, if not potentially better than one like long training session. So I think, and it makes sense to me that, the consistent, again, utilization and input of glucose into the muscles throughout the day would be more beneficial than even just a single like bout of exercise. But that would be an interesting study. Maybe someday they'll do that.
It's food for thought. Look, at the end of the day, you got to make it work. So you do something, right? Like do one of those things. But if you're like, I could do either, which do I do? Yeah, it's nice to know which one's a little more optimal for some folks.
Yeah. But one thing we do like with clients is like every time you go to the bathroom, like do 10 extra squats. Like you, especially for, those who sit at a desk, like, can you set a timer for the hour and just stand up and do 10 squats, right? It takes 10, maybe 15 seconds, right? To do 10 squats. Like who doesn't have time to do that?
Oh yeah. People say they don't have time for a lot of things, right, Brooke? That they do. So, all right. So continuing on with like, ultimately we're trying to support hormones for women in perimenopause. And again, people are thinking, okay, where blood sugar comes into this because of the stress. We mentioned before the logical chain here of stress affecting hormones, affecting fat storage, the ability to lose fat. I want to make sure that the listener continues to have that, like, what are the cause and effect of all this? And where do I ultimately have the biggest impact with my actions rather than like getting frustrated and thinking I have to get treatment or supplements or something like that?
Yeah. Like I said, so biggest thing, like simple shifts with nutrition, that would be, making sure, like I said, you're getting enough protein, you're getting enough high quality, nutrient dense food, enough fiber, right? 25 to 35 grams per day of fiber. And then in the order that you eat your meals, fiber, fat, protein, carbs. And then, again, if you strength training, of course, strength training 2 to 3 times a week, making sure you have that muscle. If you can do walks and your squats throughout the day, those are some of the most impactful things you can do as far as blood sugar is concerned. So
maybe the other angle on this is what not to do, because I'll tell you, and you, I'm sure 100% agree with what you hear online all the time. Fasting, low carb. What are the other ones? Like we could just knock them down right now. Let's go.
Okay. So fasting. I actually also have a whole podcast on this. But fasting,
do you know what number it is? What episode, or is it recent? We can, if we connect, we could drop it in later.
Okay. Yeah. It was semi recent. Okay. If they scroll through, they'll find it. I only have 40 episodes, so it's not like it'll be hard.
Awesome. I'm sure they're super high quality 40 episodes. So good. That's easy. People can binge the whole thing.
Yeah. But so fasting, there are a ton of benefits to fasting, actually. But most people, especially women, are doing it wrong. The reality of it is that, not eating, undernourishing, that is a stressor. And most women are already not eating enough. And so you cut off, you give yourself a 6-hour time window to shove 2,000 calories in. Like, I love to eat, but like, that's going to be hard for even me. And then most women, aren't getting, like I said, enough as it is. And so, but, within that, then we have cortisol, and that is, again, a blood sugar regulator. So if you wake up in the morning when your cortisol should be, right, the highest, that's normal. We want it to be high. That's what wakes you up. And it helps stabilize your blood sugar through the night because we're not eating overnight. So in the morning, right, it's waking up, it's high. If you continue to not eat, right, instead of breaking that fast and allowing, the food that you're eating to then stabilize your blood sugar, your cortisol will continue to remain elevated. So that's problem number one. And most women, they're not cutting off their eating window at night because that is the most difficult for most people. But they take it off the morning. And so when they're doing fasting, they're not eating until, 12, 1 o'clock, on top of which they're usually, having coffee, which also caffeine can be a major stressor, can increase your cortisol, and I have to just clarify this because cortisol, there's nothing wrong inherently with cortisol. We need it, right? It is a natural hormone that plays a role in, every function of our body. But especially in perimenopause, it can actually really impact fat loss efforts and, the way that your body continues to produce hormones. So because too much cortisol will actually take the energy from other sex hormones. And so, that you'll see in not influencers, but like a lot of people being like, cortisol doesn't matter. Like, people are pushing it too much. And it's like, okay, there's a line. Like, I don't want you to just stress over cortisol, but you have to know that there are physiological like implications to these actions that you're taking. And they can impact your fat loss efforts. So mini rant there.
No, it makes sense, especially when you're like, it's an indicator, it's biomarker, biofeedback of what's going on. It's not that you want to go out and get a cortisol blocking supplement and just put a patch on this downstream thing. You want to lift and eat for your blood sugar and balance your food and don't fast at the wrong time, etc. Yeah. Okay.
Totally. So yeah, that's, those are, two of the major like issues with fasting is they're not getting enough food, because it's really hard to eat in that window. And then that extended morning, fast does impact blood sugar, cortisol, etc. And then if they're not planning, what they're going to eat, if it's not quality, right? They're not only undernourishing, they're not getting enough protein, which causes muscle loss. They are, not getting enough fiber, which causes, backup and detox and bowel movements. And then, so those are the major issues with it. But honestly, having an eating window and, stopping eating like 6, 7, maybe even at the latest, I think honestly for everybody, not just perimenopausal women, but there's a reason that, we have this overnight fast, and it gives your body a chance to actually regenerate, right? Fasting, it does actually have a lot of benefits, but it has to be done in the right way for perimenopausal women specifically.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Before I started working with Philip, I had been trying to lose weight and was really struggling with consistency. But from the very beginning, Philip took the time to listen to me and understand my goals. He taught me the importance of fueling my body with the right foods to optimize my training in the gym, and I lost 20 pounds. More importantly, I gained self-confidence. What sets Philip apart is the personal connection. He supported and encouraged me every step of the way. So if you're looking for a coach who cares about your journey as much as you do, I highly recommend Philip Pape.
No, that makes sense. That's a great approach, right? Like, we're not trying to black and white everything here and say there's, only one way. There's the way to do it. And I say everybody's fasting when they sleep, right? They're fasting. So now it's a matter of like, okay, at the end of the day, listen to your body. How's your food impacting your sleep and your biometrics? If you shifted your time window, would you be more consistent with it? Could you align it with your energy during the day? Like all the things, right?
Yeah.
So where do carbs come into this as well? Because recently I've been digging in. Did I come out with the episode yet? I don't know. There might be one coming out about the connection between carbs and cortisol, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah. Carbs help manage cortisol output is the reality of it. And that is one reason why low carb diets, are an issue. The other side of that, there are actually some studies that short term, especially for perimenopausal women, short term, lower carb, higher fat diets do actually help, stabilize blood sugar, decrease stress in the body, help with hormone production, especially from women who it's like a generational thing. So like the generation before me, they were like low fat, right? eating the low fat dairy, low fat milk, that kind of thing. And then my generation, I feel like, is low carb. We're like, all right, we're going to do keto or low carb. So it kind of depends on like, and some people are kind of in the middle of that. So I get, different women coming to me, but the, getting enough quality fats, most importantly, which is, we're not on keto yet, but that is the biggest, issue. And because hormones are made with B vitamins and cholesterol. And so without that fat, those quality fats, you're going to struggle to make hormones. And then carbohydrates, I mean, carbs are our body's main and preferred source of energy is the reality of it. They also have a ton of fiber. So, we're not just looking at cortisol in terms of regulation, but detoxification, digestion. The fiber in foods feed our gut microbiome, which is a whole nother aspect of perimenopause that, comes into play. And so carbs are a necessary part of life.
Yeah, I agree. And you didn't even have to like make the case for all the other benefits for performance and energy and recovery. Now, just saying that alone, I've seen it. I'm sure you've seen it. Women come to you having undernourished, but also eating too few carbs, and just adding carbs can all of a sudden unlock a whole bunch of vitality. It's like, whoa, yeah. I have energy. I have my hormones, whatever. So before we wrap up, go ahead. And fat loss. Yes.
Yes. Like, I know we're over time, but that is one of the biggest things. Like, people come to us, they're eating low carb, low calorie. I mean, I've literally doubled some women's calories and they lose weight and they're like, what is that? It's like, this is what happens when you nourish your body, right? Because then it comes back to the nervous system, I think, largely. You're in that fight or flight state when you're starving, basically. And so your body's like, no, we're hanging on to, everything we got right now. And, yes, like when it comes to starvation, right? If you are vastly undereating for a long period of time, yeah, you're going to lose weight and waste away to nothing. But that's not usually what happens. People, eat low carb, low calorie all week, and then they have one day that they eat a ton to try, because their bodies are trying to make up for it all. And so they're not actually like starving, but they would be if they ate how they do during the week, like all the time. So yeah, it's a interesting phenomenon to witness.
Yeah, I think you hit on some of the really big points today. Like, just to recap, right? We came into this with the premise, why are women struggling to lose fat, or why are they gaining more fat during perimenopause? And what I heard from you is it is the hormones, but it's not necessarily the hormones in that what you're doing about it supports your hormones. And it's not like you're trying to just therapy your way out of it, right? Supplement your way out of it.
Yes.
And it's both. It's all of it together. And you have to understand the change in physiology, and that you can't act like you were in your 20s, that you've got to eat enough food and nutrients, enough fiber. You have to have balance. You have to think about your blood sugar. It sounds like a lot, but at the end of the day, I think you hinted multiple times, eating a variety of whole foods, nutritious foods, and like not under eating is a great start. It's a great start.
Yeah.
And just to kind of segue into ending this episode and then teasing into the other conversation we're having, how do cardio and lifting then play into this? Because it's not just about nutrition, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, I mentioned muscle. That is a huge supporter of not only blood sugar, but of bone health, of longevity, quality of life, which, people in their 20s aren't usually too worried about. But I feel like once you get into your 30s and 40s, it's at least in the back of your head being like, okay, I don't want to be in a wheelchair or have to be in a walker or have somebody else taking care of me when I'm, 60, 70 years old. So, strength training at least 2 to 3 times a week, 30-minute sessions. And we want to lift heavy. This is, I'm going to put heavy in quotes, heavy for you. People hear heavy and they get really intimidated. Women hear heavy.
I have quotes too. I have a pair of quotes in my pocket too for heavy, just like you do.
Okay. Yeah. But, this is, studies were done on strength training, and, 75% of your 1 rep max for, 4 to 6 reps is going to be kind of the optimal range for building muscle, but also reducing or reducing inflammation, basically longevity markers. There was a bunch of longevity markers tested with these ranges, and those were the ones that improved the stats the most, essentially. And so so strength training in that capacity, plyometrics, those are all going to impact bone density, which vastly decreases as estrogen declines, after age 30 for women. And then speaking of, quality of life, right? You break a hip after age 65, the 30% of people die within a year, 60% die within 5 years. Like it's gnarly. So those are really powerful tools and really important tools for, again, maintaining not just fat loss and metabolism, that kind of stuff, but also quality of life as you age. And then cardio gets, I'm going to say really bastardized. And so you absolutely need it. You need it for heart health. High intensity exercise even is great for even women in perimenopause. But we do have to manage it, right? You can't go to boot camp 6 days a week, for an hour long high intensity class and think that your body is going to be stoked about it. Not only are your joints probably not going to love it, but also that's a major stressor. You're probably not eating enough to support that kind of activity as it is. So, usually I recommend, science recommends, two at most, usually true high intensity. And that's the other thing, is an hour long class is not true high intensity work. It shouldn't last usually more than 15, 20 minutes. Yeah. If you're pushing, like, you're not lasting more than, 15, 20 minutes doing something like that. And then zone 2 is another really powerful heart health, cardiovascular supporting way to support your overall fat loss and just longevity through perimenopause.
Love it. Love it. And if you're listening and you're like, okay, I'm struggling, I'm frustrated, I can't lose weight, even though we're ultimately talking about fat loss, setting things up the way Brooke talked about today without stressing yourself with another diet is a great start before you then say, okay, now I've got things dialed in. Now let me go for some little more aggressive, say, fat loss at that point. There's an order of things we want to do. So, all right, if you like what you heard in this episode, everyone, you're going to want to listen to the second half of this. We kind of hinted and teased at it. Brooke interviews me on Fitness Simplified podcast. It's in your feed right now, same time, different podcast, of course. Fitness Simplified, we're going to talk about muscle metabolism. She explained the hormones really well here, the lifestyle, the nutrition side. So we're going to talk about body composition, muscle metabolism. Search for Fitness Simplified podcast or click the link in the show notes. Brooke, it has been a lot of fun. It's been a pleasure to have you on. Thanks for joining me again.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. This is awesome. Great combo.